We are now in the semi-final matches of the singles category in the Phoenix Festival tournament. The winners of the 5 matches today will move on to the round-robin grand finals. So use the link in the description below to go and vote for who you think would win in each match and give your reasoning as to why. At this point in the tournament, only the strong characters remain, and a lot of these fights could go either way, so I'm curious to know what your guys' thoughts are. In our first match of the day, we have Crow Bronwyn versus Talk in the urban and ocean biomes. Crow, of course, fighting with his Harbinger and his semblance of misfortune, and Talk fighting with her dual blades and her semblance of 60 seconds invulnerability. Out of these two characters, we've seen Crow fight on screen way more often than we have seen for Talk, as Talk has only had a single fight in the RWBY series, and likely we will never see her fight again. But I would still argue that they are on quite a comparable skill level. Crow, of course, being a member of Ozpin's Inner Circle, member of Team Stark, having years of experience as a huntsman out in the field, and Talk being a similar case with being a member of Salem's Inner Circle, trusted to go out on missions, hunt down the Silver Eyes, and in the one fight that she did have in the RWBY series, she was fighting toe-to-toe against Maria Calavera, the Grim Reaper in her prime. Of course, Talk did end up losing that battle in the end, but arguably, if it wasn't for her arrogance, she did best the Grim Reaper. Even though she did have a couple of extra goons there, they didn't really slow Maria down that much, so both of these fighters are extremely capable, and I don't think it would be a clean victory for either side. Honestly, I could see Crow having a lot of trouble dealing with Talk, especially when Talk activates her semblance, not having to worry about defense, and can continuously go on the offensive. Crow having his Harbinger, it would be a difficult weapon for Talk to keep up with. In the sword form, not so much, but once Crow transforms Harbinger into its Scythe mode, or even a Tonfa Scythe mode, possibly shifting between them, that would be a little bit more difficult for Talk to keep up with. Now, Talk, when she fought against Maria Calavera, was able to keep up with the twin commas that Maria was using, so the Scythe would give Talk a little bit of trouble, considering it would have much more reach than Talk's blades, but I think Talk, having both of the blades, would be able to get a few hits in on Crow, Crow would be able to get a few hits in on Talk. I could honestly see some scenarios where Talk would be able to beat Crow in this fight. Crow's Misfortune wouldn't be able to activate that much on whatever it was that Talk was doing, especially in the urban and ocean biomes. Not really much where you can manipulate the probability of things happening. Talk, when she's striking with her swords, there's not really much variability in her sword strikes. Maybe in the ricochet and things like that, she could get unlucky with, and it could ricochet in a bad way, leaving her open, and Crow could use that to his advantage, but considering Talk's skill, the probability of that happening would be very low, not really much for Crow to manipulate with his semblance. So I don't think Crow's Misfortune would play much of a role here, and it would come down to when Talk is able to activate her semblance, or if she needs to at all, as she did in her previous fights. Because Talk's semblance, once she activates it, well, she has 60 seconds until her aura breaks, so with that being the case, she would have to either not use it at all, or only use it when it comes to a crucial moment. Overall, I do think that Crow has maybe a bit more experience than Talk. He seems a bit older than Talk was when she died, so I would say that Crow maybe has a bit more experience, as well as his Harbinger being more versatile than Talk's weapons. I think the weapon advantage would give Crow a little bit of a leg up over Talk, and I think he would win, but I could still see Talk winning against Crow in different scenarios, and this would be an interesting fight to see play out on screen. All of these fights I would love to see at some point or another, but make sure you let me know down in the comments below who you think would win in each of these fights. For now, I think that Crow would be able to edge it out over Talk, but again, not entirely sure. And then moving to our second fight, we have Maria Calavera versus Pura Nikos in the urban and geyser biomes. Maria fighting with her weapons of life and death, her twin commas, and her semblance of preflexes. And Pura Nikos fighting with her Milo and Akoo, her shield and sword that can also transform into a rifle and a spear that can be launched, though launching it as a spear in this fight may not be the best case scenario, though with her semblance of polarity she would be able to pull it back to her, assuming, of course, Maria doesn't interfere with that. This matchup did happen in an exhibition match before the Phoenix Festival tournament began, and Pura was the victor by a very slight margin, though I disagree with that being the case. I think that Maria would be able to take out Pura without that much difficulty. Pyrrha, with her semblance of polarity, being able to manipulate metal weapons, metal objects, is something that a lot of characters would have a lot of trouble with, and has garnished her a couple victories throughout the tournament thus far. Fighting against Yang, etc. Yang with her metal arm, even though Yang would be the more skilled opponent, Pyrrha with her polarity, being able to manipulate that. You know, her polarity is a very powerful semblance for fighting against other huntsmen and huntresses. But when it comes to Maria, with her twin commas, they have gravity dust in them. If Pyrrha is ever able to disarm Maria of one of them, Maria could activate the gravity dust to bring it back, and she is able to manipulate her weapons just like Pyrrha is able to manipulate her weapons with her polarity. Not to mention, Maria also has her preflexes, so whenever she feels the tug of Pyrrha's polarity, she would be able to react to that quicker than other opponents might be able to. So I think that, combined with Maria's experience, she was a licensed huntress, the best in her class, and has many more years of experience out in the field over Pyrrha, as Pyrrha, although she was the best in her class at the time, she was still only a first-year student. And Maria, being a lot older, having more experience, I think things are just stacked in Maria's favor over Pyrrha's, and so I think that Maria would win against Pyrrha in this scenario. But moving on to our third match of the day, and the hardest one for me to decide out of all of the matches in today's round, we have Tyrion Kalos versus Raven Bronwyn in the anti-gravity and desert biomes. These two are extremely fast and extremely skilled opponents. Tyrion fighting with the Queen's servants, as well as his scorpion tail that could poison opponents. Combined with his semblance of aura disruption, it makes a pretty lethal combination, though no one's going to be dying in this fight, given the tournament scenario that we set up. And of course, Raven fighting with her Omen, and all of the dust capabilities that come with that. Raven will not be using any of her magic or the maiden powers, etc., but her Omen and the dust capabilities gives her a lot of versatility when it comes to utilizing her weapon. She won't be able to use her semblance of Kindred Link, as she has no one on the battlefield that she can portal to. She's not going to be portaling to anyone in the stands, so this would come down to a pretty close combat fight between the two of them. Tyrion, I don't think, would have much of a chance to use his aura disruption, as so far as we've seen it in the RWBY series, he has to cloak his hands in his aura, draw back his weapons, and try to attack opponents that way. If he reaches out an arm at Raven, she's probably going to be hacking at it, trying to take it off, reducing his aura in numerous different ways. But one thing Tyrion does have going for him is that the Queen's servants and the scorpion pincer shape that they have seems like it would be very good for, I don't know, breaking blades made out of dust? I feel like Tyrion would be able to block with one arm and then use the other of the Queen's servants to kind of, well, pincer Raven's blades and then shatter them. Normally, the dust blades are good for a few different hits. We saw in the fight that Raven had against Cinder. Granted, there was maiden powers flying about at the time, so we're not exactly sure on the number of hits that each blade is good for, but it did seem that it was only good for maybe 3 to 5 hits for each blade going at full force, and I think that Tyrion would have the strength needed to be able to snap those blades. But on the flip side, I feel like Tyrion would be weak to dust attacks. Raven, with her Omen having all of the different types of dust, she would easily have fire dust, lightning dust, we've seen ice dust, there's also green blades and blue blades, so there's also probably plant dust, earth dust, water dust, etc. All of these different capabilities that she would have, and I feel like that's something that Tyrion isn't the best at dealing with. He would be able to anticipate Raven using this dust, though, because he would have had a chance to watch previous matches, as would everyone in the tournament thus far. They would know their opponent's capabilities, but considering in Volume 7, when Tyrion caught Robin's arrow with his teeth, he never anticipated that, I don't know, there would be dust in it and it would explode. So Tyrion would have to be a bit more hesitant when dealing with Raven's blades, as if he went to go and snap, I don't know, a yellow blade imbued with lightning dust. Trying to snap that with the Queen's servants would only electrocute himself. Similarly, if it's the ice dust, it might freeze the Queen's servants, making them not really as useful. Again, Tyrion could easily just slam them against the ground, break them, but that would create openings for Raven. Both of these characters have little advantages over each other. It would be an extremely fast-paced fight. Tyrion, as I've mentioned in numerous matches before, has his 5 points of contact, fighting with both of his arms, his legs, and his tail, which is a lot for normal opponents to keep up with, but Raven would be able to accommodate this with the dust that she has in her blades, be able to, accelerate herself forward with wind dust and ice dust, allowing her to slide across the battlefield. She could use fire dust to manipulate the desert biome, create glass, and do things that way. So It's very difficult for me to decide who would win in this fight, because I could see numerous scenarios where either would happen. And frankly, this would be the one out of all of them in this round that I would call a draw, but that is not going to be the case here, so I would have to, I think, give it to Raven because of the dust capabilities, but I could see Tyrion easily being able to snap her blades, overwhelm her with the numerous points of contacts and flurry of blows, so I think that Raven might be able to edge out a win over Tyrion, but it would be extremely close. Out of all of them, let me know your thoughts on this one down in the comments below. And then we move to our fourth match of the semi-finals, which is Penny Polendina versus Glinda Goodwitch in the Savannah and Geyser biomes. Penny fighting with her floating array, the numerous blades and lasers that she has at her disposal, as well as the flight capabilities that she obtained in Volume 7, and Glinda Goodwitch fighting with her weapon, the Disciplinarian, but more so her semblance of telekinesis. And unfortunately for Glinda, the biomes that she got for this fight don't necessarily work in her favor, as the Savannah and Geyser biomes don't have much to manipulate, or as much as other biomes would. For example, the urban or desert biome, which there's plenty of things that Glinda could use her telekinesis on and use as weapons against Penny. The Savannah biome does have the odd tree here and there that Glinda could use as a weapon, and Penny would likely be able to blast out of the way with her lasers, and if Glinda tried to manipulate the water, well, once that got close to Penny, Penny could blast it with her lasers, create a smoke screen, kind of, obscuring Glinda's vision, and use that to her advantage to get behind Glinda. Now, Glinda is an experienced huntress, has much more experience out in the field, and arguably much more skill than Penny, as Penny hasn't really been, I guess, alive for that long, doesn't have that much experience, but given the flight capabilities as well as the floating array and the lasers and ranged capabilities that she has the advantage against Glinda starting out the fight. Now, depending on how long Glinda is able to last in this fight, Penny, if she is blasting with her lasers and slashing at Glinda with her blades, she might be creating rubble in the ground, breaking up the geyser biome, depending on how much energy she's displacing. And with that, the more rubble that's created, the more that Glinda would be able to manipulate and use as weapons against Penny. There's also the distinct possibility that Glinda might be able to use her telekinesis and simply pull chunks of the geyser biome apart to use as weapons against Penny. But then that also draws into question the aura constraints that Glinda would have. Using her telekinesis on such a large scale would start to exhaust her. And Penny, we don't exactly know how aura works with her, if her lasers require aura, or if she's just using aura strengthening on her blades to give them more power, or how exactly aura is working with Penny. We haven't seen her have an aura flicker or aura break in the RWBY series, so there's still some unknowns there, whether her flight is draining her aura or just internal battery. We have seen her in a charging station in Volume 7, so there's a few different things, at least we assume it's a charging station, so there's a few unknowns when it comes to Penny, but given the scenario that is set up, I think Penny would be able to outlast Glinda's aura, especially considering Glinda just doesn't have that much to manipulate with her telekinesis. So I think that Penny does defeat Glinda given this scenario, or at least has a higher likelihood to defeat Glinda. I could still see a few ways that Glinda could win, but even though it doesn't exactly sound right to say that Penny defeats Glinda, I think given the scenario that is set up, this is how it would play out. But again, let me know your thoughts on it down in the comments below. And then we get to our final match of the semi-finals, which is Ozpin versus Neapolitan in the Savannah and Ice biomes. Ozpin fighting with the Long Memory, and Neapolitan fighting with her Hush, her Parasol, as well as her semblance of overactive imagination, the ability to create real illusions. Both of them, when it comes to actually dealing damage to their opponents, have a very similar fighting style. Ozpin using his cane almost like a sword, but kind of like a rapier as well, using the tip to deal a flurry of blows against opponents. At least that's what we saw when he fought against Cinder and when he was taking over Oscar's body fighting against Hazel. Neapolitan has a similar style when it comes to her trying to deal damage, as she would use the tip or point of her Hush and try to use it as a rapier to stab her opponents. But Neo also is very good at parrying and blocking opponents. We saw Ozpin do that in his fight against Cinder, where he was enhanced by magic. He won't be that fast in this fight, as he won't have the magic enhancement, but he still has all of the years of experience that he has to draw upon. So he would be more skilled at combat than Neo, so when it gets to close combat, almost a duel of sorts, he would be able to outclass her if it was just a straight-up brawl. But Neo has her semblance of overactive imagination. Whenever Ozpin would land a hit, she could activate her semblance, create an illusion, get around Ozpin, and be able to deal damage against him that way. From what we know of Ozpin, though, he seems like he's a very calm and collected individual, very analytical, and I feel like that would be the case when he's on the battlefield as well, being able to gauge his opponent's strengths and weaknesses, their tendencies in battle. And although he would be taking damage from Neo as she's using her overactive imagination, which would be draining her aura, he would possibly be able to start anticipating where she would show up, where her attacks were coming from, and be able to adapt his fighting style accordingly. Now, the ice biome would definitely give Neo an advantage, using the reflections off of the ice to give herself added illusions and added ways to attack from. The savanna biome possibly giving her an extra place to hide, so there are some advantages she would have over Ozpin, and we're not exactly sure Ozpin's aura levels, how strong his aura is, and how long it would take Neo to drain it down. We also don't know Ozpin's semblance, or, how many illusions Neo could make before her aura would be drained as well. So I could honestly see this fight going either way, but I think Ozpin would have the slight advantage in this fight, given that his fighting style is close combat and Neo's is close combat as well. If Neo had some long-range capabilities, I think she would have the advantage, but with Ozpin and Neo having to be close combat to deal damage against one another, I think that Ozpin would come out the victor. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below on each of the matches that we covered today. As I said, the 5 winners will move on to the Grand Finals, which is a round-robin style tournament. They will each face each other once. Those matches will take place next week. The results will be posted this weekend, so there is a lot to look forward to. Make sure to subscribe to the channel to keep up with the Phoenix Festival Tournament, the theory videos that are coming out, the fairy tales of Remnant, and all of the other videos on the way. Join the Guild of the Eternal Flame. Tweet me at PhoenixKnight7. Join our Discord server as well, linked in the description below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.